Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Today on the show, we welcome Joe Campo. He is the team chaplain for USA Olympic Wrestling. You're going to love his story. This guy is passionate for people, passionate for Jesus, and a great storyteller, and he's been through a lot. Before we get to our interview with Jose, I want to tell you about Compassion International. They are the most trusted child development ministry in the world. We say that a lot here on the podcast, but we really mean it because they are wonderful partners, wonderful sponsors with us, and we love what they stand for. And that's simply releasing children from poverty. They have an amazing system, and it works, and it's reaching a ton of kids. So I want to direct you to the website first, compassion.com/sportspectrum. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. You'll see a list of children there, and they're just waiting to be sponsored, waiting for that opportunity to be released from poverty. And you can make that difference. It's $38 a month, tax deductible. And as I said, it releases a child from poverty. Food, education, medical care, and vocational training. Over 2 million children around the world are being released from poverty because of the work with Compassion International. Again, the website is compassion.com/sportspectrum, and pray about sponsoring a child today. Really excited to welcome Joe Campo to Sports Spectrum. Jose grew up the son of a Hall of Fame wrestling coach, his dad, Joe Campo, and making some poor lifestyle choices, we'll just say, when he was younger, culminated with him being involved in the largest cheating scandal in West Point's history. He talks about that. It's not something he's proud of, but it's something that God has used for him to share to help tell his story of faith. And Jose got saved in 1985. So we're talking 9 years after this cheating scandal in 1976. Jose came to faith. He's a wrestling coach, a former wrestling coach, and was for 40 years, places like Yale and Southern Connecticut and a bunch of high schools. And then he got involved in FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, in 1992, and has been intersecting the world of wrestling, coaching, and faith in his life for the last 20 to 25 years. He's developed some coaches' mentoring programs as well for various Olympic teams, high school teams, colleges, and, as I mentioned, the team chaplain for the USA Olympic Wrestling team. And oh, by the way, Joe Campo is a National Wrestling Hall of Famer. This guy's legit. He's got a great story. He is about as passionate a guest as we've had on this show and a really great storyteller. I think you'll love hearing the journey of Joe Campo, his journey to God, right here on Sports Spectrum. Jose, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. What an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you. Your story is a powerful one. I really am excited to get to that in just a second. But I know as we tape this interview, you had just got back from a trip to Italy ministering with the USA Olympic Wrestling team. Can you tell us about that trip and maybe sort of the role that you have right now working with USA, with the USA Olympic Wrestling team?
Sure. I was a wrestling coach for 40 years, and I saw a lot of teachers without a plan. So I wanted to use the two things that I loved. I love God because he changed my life, and I love the sport of wrestling. So God opened up an opportunity through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for a chaplaincy program. So the Olympic team came to San Diego 2.5 years ago in the summer for a training camp, and they called and asked if I'd like to be the chaplain for the camp. So I cracked up, and of course I loved that. And next thing you know, they started inviting me out to the Olympic Training Center, where they had never had a chaplain before for the Olympic wrestling team. So then I started traveling with them to the World Championships, and with the Olympics coming up, they just had a pre-Olympic wrestling tournament out in Rome, Italy. So I just got back, and what an amazing opportunity. I tell people I'm a wrestling historian also. And never before in the history of wrestling in the United States have there been so many great Christian coaches and wrestlers. So now I get to accompany the team and hold Bible studies with them and encourage them and send them daily devotions. So it's just an unbelievable opportunity. The doors that God is opening up for me is just amazing. I can't believe it. So this is how I spend a lot of my time now with not only the Olympic team, but I'm also the chaplain for Fresno State wrestling team also. So, yeah, it's a great way for me to spend my retired years.
Well, we've had chaplains on before in different sports, certainly in football and baseball. And I wonder for you with the work that you're doing, right now, even maybe what you did in Italy, what does that entail? So are you putting together, you said sending daily devotionals, encouraging guys. Are you preaching a message? Are you having a time of a chaplain, time like they do in baseball or like they do in football? What does that look like?
Yes, we do. We have opportunities for Bible studies, or I meet individually with the different wrestlers. So it's great because the chairman of FCA Wrestling, a guy named Rich Bender, is a strong Christian. The head wrestling coach, Bill Zadok, and his assistants are all Christian.
That's great.
So they just open opportunities for me to just be with the guys. In the sun, it's amazing where it place and we go into the sun. Guys have to make weight, so I'm in the sun with them. I'm out for a run with them. I'm any kind of opportunity that I have that I try to take advantage to be with these guys for encouragement. This is what I'm finding, that everyone, even the greatest, they need encouragement. So this is what I really try to do, be there for the guys, and offer encouragement, offer the great love of God. And like I said, it's just an unbelievable time. And I just can't believe God lets me do this.
I love the humility that you have. And you mentioned the greats. So we had Kyle Snyder on the show last year. You're talking about greatness, right? And one of the best wrestlers, if not the best wrestler in the world. It was clear, though, that this guy is all about putting Christ first. I loved what he had to say in the interview. And when you see someone with that talent and being the best at what they do, understand where their gift comes from, that's got to make you feel pretty good. And he's got to be one of those guys, I would imagine, that still needs that encouragement, right?
Well, it's amazing that the role that these Olympic wrestlers have, a lot of times they forget that thousands of high school and little kids look up for them.
Yeah. So
the amount of influence that they have. So when, in Italy, Kyle got pinned. So, of course, the radio broadcasts, they go to Kyle and they interview him right away. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing the message that Kyle has, that his identity is not whether his arm is raised or not. His identity is in Jesus Christ. And when these high school kids and younger hear about this, because in the sport of wrestling, you're out on the mat all alone. So a young kid, I see them crying. I see parents yelling at them when they're not successful. So with Kyle and Jordan Burroughs and Jaden Cox and Bo Nickel, like I said, the greatest wrestlers in our country are all believers. So when they can share their story and share their influence on young kids, it's just amazing the lives that they're touching. So it's incredible.
Jose Campo is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. All right, let's learn about your story. You mentioned it a little bit briefly in the beginning, but it's a pretty crazy one. Tell us about growing up in New York, the son of a Hall of Fame wrestling coach yourself.
Well, I was blessed that I was born to, in my eyes, the greatest wrestling and football coach in the history of New York. As a young boy, I saw my father change this little town that never won at anything, and he turned them into an athletic powerhouse. I would go to his football games and see the team carrying my dad off the field on their shoulders. I had so many of his wrestlers tell me that my father was the greatest, most influential person in their life. And as a young boy, I said to myself, wouldn't that be great if someday someone could say that about me? So I knew as a little boy, I wanted to be a coach, just like my dad. Man, I couldn't wait to be called Coach Campo. So yes, I as a young boy, I did everything that my dad said, and I was very successful. But then as a high school wrestler, I found out that a lot of the kids were not only as good as me, but some were even better. So instead of me following the footsteps of all the great champions that my dad coached, unfortunately, I rebelled and I started looking for shortcuts and I was fooling people. And unfortunately, those shortcuts led to consequences that really put a downsman on my life.
Mm. Can you go a little deeper on the shortcuts? I think a lot of teenagers, they see the easy way. They see the road more traveled, we'll say, than less traveled, right? As the Bible talks about. Can you talk about a little bit more about what was going on there? And I know it leads to your time at West Point as well, where, something even bigger takes place. Can you kind of share a little bit more?
Sure. In wrestling, you have to make a specific weight class. And I wanted to make the team. Unfortunately, we had guys better than me on the team. So the only way that I could make the varsity lineup was to lose 20 pounds. So instead of me following a good diet, I was a bulimic. I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning when my parents were sleeping, and I would go up and eat as much food as I could. Then I would go down to the bathroom and I would stick my finger down my throat and I would puke all the food that I had just eaten. I didn't understand the consequences of the choices that I was making. I didn't know that your stomach had acid in it that could eat through metal. Well, that acid ate all the enamel off my teeth. So now my teeth are all messed up. I didn't understand. I missed my whole junior year of high school wrestling because I ruptured my trachea from puking so much.
Wow.
And then I took laxatives that destroyed my digestive system. And Jason, I lived my life to please my father. I thought the only way I could please him was by being successful. And because of the lifestyle choices that I made, unfortunately, I was never a champion. Can you imagine? I started wrestling when I was 3 years old. My father is in the Hall of Fame, and I wasn't even a league champion. Now, see, my older brother, now he was the champion of our family. My older brother listened and did everything that my dad said. And man, my dad was so proud of him. My brother ended up going to West Point, and he was the captain of the wrestling team at West Point. And so I thought that if I went to West Point, that my dad would be proud of me too. But unfortunately, I also took shortcuts in the classroom. I learned how to cheat on my tests when I was in 10th grade. So I cheated on every test that I took. In fact, I cheated on the SATs. That's how I was able to get into West Point. And because I didn't get caught, I continued cheating. And this is what a lot of kids do. They do bad things and they haven't been caught. And unfortunately, they continue to do those bad things.
Yeah.
Well, then in 1976, I was involved in the largest cheating scandal in the history of West Point. Me and 150 other cadets got kicked out of West Point for cheating. It was national news. It was in the front page of the New York Times. And can you imagine? My father worked his whole life to build the reputation of the Campo name, and then I destroyed that reputation. And it's so funny because my life verse is 1 Timothy 1:15, where it said, Jesus came to this world to save sinners, and I was the worst of them all.
Yeah.
And Jason, that's how I saw myself, that I was the worst of them all. So I ran from New York all the way to California, where no one knew me and no one knew all the bad things that I was doing. But unfortunately, I didn't change my lifestyle. I did drugs for 11 years. Man, I couldn't find a job. I didn't have a car. I couldn't even find a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then one of my dad's ex-wrestlers, a man named Bobby Antonacci. Bobby and I grew up together. Bobby went to become a 3-time All-American at Iowa State, but he was the first Christian that I had ever met. Bobby went to my house in New York where my dad told him all the bad things that I was doing. Bobby flew out to San Diego to find me and tell me that even though my father had not forgiven me, that we have a God up in heaven that will not only forgive me, that he's got an unbelievable plan for my life. I had never heard that before. I thought God was mad at me. I would pray, go to church and pray for me at all my big matches. And then when I didn't win, I thought God was mad at me. Next thing you know, he invited me to a Christian church, and I go there, and the pastor was a former wrestler. I didn't know these guys had former lives. So all of a sudden he tells the story how he was a wrestler in the state of Oregon, and I couldn't believe it. So I said, well, I'm going to come back the next week. I come back the next week, and the assistant pastor is there, and he tells a story called 40 Wrestlers for Christ. And I said, I can't believe it. I come to this church 2 weeks in a row, and they tell stories about wrestling. And that day in 1985, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And then unbelievable miracles have happened ever since. So, yeah, it was a crazy story.
That is awesome. I mean, and crazy. And it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of athletes, a lot of coaches, different people, and your story resonates, I think, even more for our listeners, even for me, than the one. And this is not to compare, I guess, testimonies. You've heard a lot of them too, but there's something about reaching a true point of brokenness and really understanding that we need to thirst for that living water, as it says in John, every single day to Jesus. And for you, can you talk a little bit more about those moments? I mean, you can tell your story in 5 minutes, or you can tell your story in 5 hours, but there's some moments there where I'm guessing faith's not happening, not even prevalent before you meet your first Christian, as you said. And there's a broken relationship with your father that you're trying to figure out. Can you walk us through a little bit of that and maybe the parallels that start to take place with your newfound faith in the ultimate father and trying to eventually reconcile with your own dad?
Well, it was so funny because I knew God had placed this dream in my heart to be a coach. And I was confident that I knew that if I ever became a coach, I was confident that I could be successful, only because I know what it takes to fail.
Yeah.
Right. And wrestling is such a tough sport that I know what it takes to fail. So I knew that I could change lives, but I was living a lie. I was great at fooling people. See, at West Point, everyone thought, oh, there I was at West Point. But little did they know that I was smoking weed. I was cheating on every test. So I was great at fooling people. And Jason, we have a lot of people in our world today that are great at fooling people.
Yes.
Right? Lance Armstrong fooled a lot of people. Bill Cosby fooled a lot of people. Just the Houston Astros. I'm a Yankee fan.
Yeah.
They fooled a lot of people. So this is, and you can't fool God.
That's right.
You can't fool God. So I was great at fooling people, and I was tired. I was tired of living the lifestyle that I was having. I thought I just had bad luck. But Bobby Antonacci came to me and told me that my choices have consequences. And that's what a lot of kids don't understand today. They don't think of the consequences before they make their choices. And this is what I did for the last 25 years. I go around now and I share my story with these high school kids, with college kids, to let them understand. Number one, I want them to learn from the mistakes that I made. I lived my life in regret. How can I do such a thing? So when I go and share my story, I hope that, number one, that they will learn from the mistakes that I make. Number two, I remind them that their choices have consequences. Now, there's good consequences too, that if you give your life to the Lord and pray and read and study about him, that he's going to bless you. So everyone just thinks of bad consequences, but there's good consequences. If you practice a single leg in wrestling every day, you can have a good single leg. But again, so I want to teach them that there are consequences for their choices. And then I always want to remind them that God has an unbelievable plan for their life, that if they ask Jesus Christ to be the head coach of their life, that he'll bless them, he'll give them, he'll do things that are unexplainable.
Yeah.
In 1993, I was given the National Coach of the Year award. Now, most of the coaches that win those awards, their teams have been regional or state champions. Jason, my team wasn't even league champions. So I couldn't understand. I was embarrassed. How could I win such an award? But little did I know that this was a plan for God to open up opportunities for me to share my story, that I could hopefully change lives of kids that are and coaches that were making bad choices. So it was just crazy how, and still today, the things that God is doing for me, I'm amazed. For me to be able to work with the Olympic wrestling team, and it is just an unbelievable blessing. I can't believe God lets a knucklehead like me be around some of the greatest people and encourage them and help them. So yeah, I'm extremely blessed, extremely lucky.
I like to say God is in the knucklehead business, because I mean, look at all the people in the Bible, Jesus, that were his disciples, right? There were a lot of them were knuckleheads, and he said, you know what, I can use those knuckleheads to proclaim my name. Well, let me ask you this, because there's a lot of people listening, I think, that have, been through some difficult moments, maybe not as difficult, maybe way more difficult from the eyes of the world to what you went through, and they're ashamed, and they're not sure if they should share their story, because there's a fear factor on being judged, on being, vulnerable, putting yourself out there. I know people, even in my church, that are afraid in some ways to put out there that they've been through some really bad things, done some really bad things. And yet Jesus has come and saved them and redeemed them, but they still don't want to open up about sharing that. Can you walk us through how you came to understand that, yeah, you're ashamed of what you went through, but you realized your story could help someone, and then encourage someone who's maybe stuck in that pit a little bit and not sure about sharing their story?
To me, I think it's a real easy formula, right? When you give your life to Lord, here's my formula. You ask God, you pray and ask him for help, right? God loves to answer our prayers.
Yeah.
And then all he wants to do is tell other people about how he blessed you. So I think it's real easy. And I agree with you. Many of the great wrestlers, unfortunately, in the sport of wrestling, the only way they can make money is by going to summer wrestling camps. No sport goes to summer camps more than the sport of wrestling. So when these Olympic guys, this is how they make money. And so I have to try to encourage them to when they go to these camps, they share the moves that made them successful. So I asked them, was God a part of your success? And they say, of course he was. So then I say, so you have to share with these kids what God means to you. So yes, I know it's hard to tell about our failures, but this is what God wants us to do.
Yeah.
He wants us to share about him and to remind people that he's not mad at you, that he loves you. That if people really understood how much God loved them, that they would do whatever they could. And this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to serve God because he blessed me so much every day still. He's given me everything I ever dreamed of. Jason, when I was growing up, my family had nothing. We had 6 kids living in a 1-bedroom, no bath apartment. We didn't have a bathroom in my apartment. My dad had a toilet sticking out of the wall in his bedroom. The only way that we could take a bath was to ask the landlord upstairs. And now today, God has given me everything I ever dreamed of. I didn't want much. I wanted a wife that I could love, that I could take care of. I wanted kids that I could love and give them things. and I wanted a job that I looked forward to every day. And God has given me everything I ever dreamed of. People forget that all the good things that we have in our life is a gift from God. That's what James says. That all, and people take for granted, especially wrestlers sometimes. They want to pound their chest and say, "Hey, look at me, look what I did." But they forget that it was God who gave them the competitiveness, God that gave them the strength. So like I said, it's real easy. The Bible says you don't have because you don't ask. God loves answering your prayers. And then all he wants you to do is to tell other people that he loves them, that he's not mad at them, and that he's got an unbelievable plan. If you just ask him to be the head coach of your life, that he'll give you all the dreams, everything you ever dreamed of. So that's what I try to tell people, that, and then once you start doing it, then it makes it a whole lot easier. So that I love it. It's one of the things that I love so much, just to be able to share my story with the hope that, and I know that God can, if he can change a knucklehead like me, he could change even other people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jose, as we close here, this has been great. Let me ask you, because you're mentoring and serving as a chaplain, you're doing great things. Obviously, hearing it in your voice, how blessed you are and how you love the Lord so much, and seeing all that he's done for you. So what's he showing you right now? What's the great lesson? What's he teaching you right now in the life that you're living today? What are you learning from God?
Well, Jason, I go around when I'm not working with the other teams. I go around to local high schools, and I look and I go into the wrestling rooms to try to help coaches. So I have what I call a coaches mentoring program. And this is what I see. And, I was a teacher and a coach for 40 years. I see that the athletic programs in high schools are dying. The most influential person in America today is a high school coach. So back when I was growing up, 80 to 90% of the high school coaches were on-campus teachers. Now that percentage is about 10 to 15%. So a high school coach has another job. He shows up at practice at 3:00, leaves at 5, and he doesn't know what the kid is going through during the day. He doesn't talk to the teachers. So unfortunately, the future of high school athletics is in trouble. And so what's happening, so the kids don't have the mentors. They don't have the high school coach to take care of them. So we have to do something about that. Number one, we have to go to our colleges and we have to encourage young people to go into education and to go into coaching, because our youth are struggling because of that. Back in the day, it was our parents that were the most influential people. And now, because of the breakup of the family, the plan of the devil, he knows that the best way to destroy our country is to destroy the family.
Yeah.
And he does that through selfishness. So now, because of divorces, fathers are not at the games supporting their kids. So the kids don't want to join athletics. And now our high school kids are in trouble. So the future of athletics in our country is in trouble because of the lack of coaches that are on campus. So we really need to encourage those young kids, young people, to go into education, to go into coaching. And I truly believe if we can do that, then it will help the youth it'll help our country. So we're in trouble unless we do something about that.
He is Jose Campo. He's the team chaplain for the USA Olympic wrestling team, and lots of other titles and great things happening in his world. And certainly the way that you're encouraging others, the way that you've just encouraged me in our last 25 minutes or so of talking is awesome. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here on the show, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Oh, Jason, it was an honor. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
That was Jose Campo. Isn't he great? Wasn't he just so encouraging and passionate about God and about people and just loves Jesus and wants to just make the world a better place and using his story for God's glory. I mean, that's what it's all about. And Jose, I love the word knucklehead is what he used. And I truly believe that God is in that knucklehead business. And he's using, as Jose says, a knucklehead like him and even a knucklehead like me and all of those that are listening and love Jesus. He's going to use us all. All of us are knuckleheads, right? And using us to tell people about God. That's it. That's what we're here for, to make his name known and to know him and to make his name known. And so really appreciate Jose Campo and his willingness to come on the show, share his story. It's not an easy one to share, but I know that what he went through has made him and made his faith even stronger and hopefully encourages you in your journey as well. Many thanks to Jose, and many thanks again to our sponsors, Compassion International. For more information about how you can help release a child from poverty, check out the website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, $38 a month, tax deductible, and pray about it. Pray about sponsoring a child and helping them, releasing them from poverty today. As always, you can reach us on our social media pages. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We're also on YouTube, and you can subscribe there. But reach out to us. Maybe if you like this interview with Jose Campo, share it on your social media pages, and certainly tag us. We'll retweet it and like it and comment and share and all of those buzzwords that you hear on social media. But definitely post that and let people know about the Sports Spectrum podcast. We also want to encourage you to check out our website. It's sportsspectrum.com. That's the home base. Hopefully you've been going there, as we've been telling you on the podcast, because every day there is new content. There's articles, stories on the intersection of sports and faith. There's daily devotionals. There's every single podcast on the website at sportsspectrum.com. There's tons of archival content, old stories, articles, even that interview that I mentioned earlier with Kyle Snyder, one of the USA Olympic gold medal athletes that we had on in 2019. You can go back and listen to that interview at sportsspectrum.com and hear about his story, just like you heard about Jose Campo's story here. So check it all out. The website again, sportsspectrum.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. I hope you have a great rest of your day.